You're listening to All Hands on Tech. Come along as we get to know the people and businesses behind the province's ever-expanding tech sector.
Each episode, we'll chat with local experts to uncover the hidden gems that make Nova Scotia a hub for collaboration, innovation, and creativity.
All Hands on Tech is proudly produced by Digital Nova Scotia, the industry association for Nova Scotia's growing tech sector. Hey, welcome back to All Hands on Tech. I'm Eilish.
And I'm Greg, and I look a lot taller when I stand up than this chair does for me. But you know what? We've got another great episode coming at you today.
We certainly do, Greg. With over 11 years in the industry, Clarity Web Design Studio, formerly known as Bright Webs Design, they have been instrumental in helping numerous businesses create impactful websites. Now, these websites not only enhance online presence, attract more customers, and drive business growth, but they also prioritize accessibility.
By focusing on accessibility, businesses can enhance their brand, drive innovation, and broaden their market reach, all while maintaining a positive impact.
Of course. So without further ado, joining us now to talk about the importance of online accessibility is the founder of Clarity Web Design Studio, Steph Sedgwick. Hey, Steph, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Of course, we're happy to have you here. We're excited to jump on into this, I'm sure you also think, very important conversation.
Yep.
But first, before we do, we want to get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
So we've got some icebreaker questions to ask.
Okay.
Which we have not run by you yet.
That's true.
So we'll get
I'm
Greg
ready
to get us started.
Okay.
Perfect. So let's start off with some unusual or surprising hobby that you have had, at least something you tried.
Surprising, like for other people?
Just could be something that, like, I don't know, maybe people just don't expect.
Oh. That is a great question. I can't think of a single thing. I think they're all quite dull, really, like sort of standard operation sort of things, like running, yoga.
Oh, yeah?
Those aren't dull.
Those are
Not
great.
dull, but they're not unusual.
Okay, fair.
Not unique.
Have you ever done the yoga with the little goats jump on top yet?
No.
That would be cool. I don't do yoga, but I would do that kind
I
of
would love
I've watched
to see
other
you do
people do
yoga.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? I know. I consume those sorts of things like online over YouTube, so
Yeah.
that's maybe my hobby. But
Everyone would be doing yoga. I'd just be hanging out with a goat in the back. Just.
I love the ones where
friends.
like you go to like puppy or like kitten yoga, and like my dream would just be that like the kitten or the puppy just like falls asleep on me, so I just can't take part in the class anymore.
yeah.
I have to be completely still to just enjoy the snuggles.
I would take a goat over an emu.
Ooh.
Oh, do you?
I have I don't
Is there like a story there? Do you have like a beef with an emu or something?
I don't like them. They're weird, and I did have a little bit of a mini experience with one once when my kids were small, and I was terrified of it. And then ever since, it's been all these Instagram accounts with these people with these loving, quote unquote, emus, and I don't get it.
Okay, so her unusual hobby is emu hating.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
You never know. For a long time, I didn't trust guacamole, but yesterday I had nachos and I tried it and it was good. So
Congratulations.
Okay, so on the questionable list is guacamole and emus.
Yep.
Good to know. Okay, if you could instantly learn any skill or talent, what would you choose, and what would you then do with that skill or talent?
Ukulele.
I love how you absolutely had that answer ready to go.
100%. I have 2 of them.
Ooh.
And I can strum.
Okay.
And that's it.
Do you know the tuning trick?
No.
When you strum each string and I don't know if this is an actual thing. I could just be
I don't
being
know.
told
So
a lie all my life, but you say my dog has fleas when you do your 4 chords, and it's like my dog has fleas, and that's how you know you're in tune. So
I wouldn't know otherwise. So I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. All right. So ukulele. Okay. We got that one.
Yep.
Okay.
So would you rather speak every language fluently or be able to communicate with animals? Well, we know you probably want to tell an emu.
I was going to say,
feel about it,
you'd have some choice words for the emu.
I only need English for that one, so that's fine. It'll figure it out. I would take the multiple language thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg, I'm interested to know your answer to that question.
Yeah.
Definitely multiple languages. My wife is Italian, and I would love to just be able to chat with her grandmother
Cute.
without that barrier, but also just I'm going to tie this into DNS. We have such a diverse group of members, students, international students, being able to make them feel more comfortable by speaking different languages, and showing that effort would be something that I'd love to do. Still on my bucket list.
Wow,
I want to learn a new language maybe this year.
That's such a beautiful answer. Now I feel guilty for saying that I want to talk to the animals, but anyway, I digress. Okay, before I embarrass myself any further with you guys and your very sweet responses here, let's dive in. Let's learn all about what it is that you do and you offer. Steph, tell us a little bit. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure. How
did you actually even get into, web designing in that industry in the first place, and how did Clarity Web Design come to be?
So it started back in 2010 when I was helping my husband with his business. So I was doing a fairly standard path that I think a lot of women find themselves on, where they're married, they're starting to have babies, they're stay at home, whatever. And I was supporting my husband at the time with his business, and he needed a website, and I had my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and I was like, I'm creative, I'm artistic, I'm pretty smart, I'm sure I can figure this out. And so I started making websites there, and it was really challenging, and it was really fun, and it's very rewarding. There's that validation sort of thing when people see it and they say that it's really great. And so it's it's one of those things where when you do a lot of volunteering, if you're someone who's like, you get things done, you tend to take on more and more. So it was sort of growing, from there. And one day I just decided to sort of formalize it, and I started the business. But it was always a side hustle for me. And it was, I always played very small, and I think that's also a very common story for women in business. And it really wasn't until after the pandemic had started, and it was about 2021, when I decided that I needed to take it seriously and to treat it like a grown-up, and to treat myself like a grown-up, and to stop playing so small. And so I started that process of the rebrand and relaunched it in 2023, but that was a couple of years after I'd gone full-time with it. And it's been a really, really cool path to be on, and it's fascinating because I think that a lot of women find themselves in this kind of a place where they've sort of fallen into something, and it wasn't necessarily a linear path that I set out to do, at the start. So.
For sure.
Cool. That speaks to kind of that adaptability that I think a lot of women maybe have the skill of, but maybe don't know how to flex it.
Absolutely. It's all about pivoting and yeah.
That.
So you mentioned the relaunch happening just in 2023.
Mm-hmm. So
you changed the name from Bright Web Design to Clarity Web Design. Can you tell us a little bit more around the thinking behind that name change?
Yeah, so it's ironic because it's a lot of work to do a rebrand, and I wouldn't recommend it unless you have to. But at the time, things were starting to ramp up with my business, and I thought, well, if I'm going to rebrand, I better do it now. But it was also a preemptive strike because when I started, because I was playing really small and I never thought I'd really go outside of Nova Scotia. So I didn't pay a lot of attention to the other businesses that were in my space. And it was in that sort of, I think it was the summer of 2023 or maybe the spring that I started seeing a couple of other sort of names popping up, and I thought, that's pretty close to mine. I better go see about trademarking, and then found out that there was a company that already had a trademark very similar to mine, not the same, but it's really, really close. Mm. And they were in New York, and they were a big agency. And at that point, I had already sort of crossed that border. About half of my clients were in the States and half in Canada. And I thought, all of a sudden, because I'm not playing small anymore, all of a sudden this could potentially be an issue.
Not a problem.
And so a preemptive strike to sort of protect my business and protect that brand, but also because I was expanding and I was bringing on a team, so it wasn't really the solopreneur kind of thing anymore. And then I spent months trying to come up with a name. Oh my goodness, it was nuts. And then landed on Clarity, which is super ironic because that's exactly what we do for our clients. And it's what we talk about all the time, like don't be clever, don't be cute, just do the thing that you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. And so it all worked out.
Amazing. Yeah. I love that you found clarity from all that.
Right? Yeah. It's the ultimate irony. So
Love that. Yeah. Love that. Okay, well, I think that leads perfectly to the next question of what is it that you actually offer service-wise to your clients?
Yeah. So we do web design and redesign primarily, and we also offer web management services. But our specialty is coming into websites that have been around for a few years or more, and they're not really doing what they need to do. And there can be a lot of different reasons for that. And we work primarily with female founders, and they are often, they might have had a website that started out really well, but then over time as technology changes, because the technology changes all the time, they've sort of fallen behind, or they were set up to look really nice, but they're not really doing anything. And we call those a sleeping beauty website. Like they're pretty, they look really pretty, but they don't really do very much.
Okay.
And so we come in and we take all of the stuff that they have and bring clarity to what they offer, and then redesign it and relaunch it on an accessible platform. And so we deal with all of the code and the so the stuff on the back end and the stuff on the public facing side to make it as accessible as possible, to remove as many barriers as possible. And then we track it to make sure that the analytics and the traffic, are doing what we want them to do. And it always does. So it's great.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So, you're all about empowering women in tech, and, why, a bit of a two-parter question. So why is that so important to your team? And then what does it actually look like supporting women in this space? Because it's still something that's fairly, male-dominated. You look at developers and that sort of thing. So could you expand a little bit on, a little bit about why it's important, and then also what does it look like to really support women in that space?
Yeah. Well, I think it's such an interesting question, right? Because when I was reading through that question before this, I was thinking about, even my own path as a female in the industry, and getting into web design is kind of like an accident, sort of. And I think a lot of women go in that way because there's sort of this lack of confidence, And I think that even now, when I look around in my own network, most of the web designers, quote unquote, tend to be female, whereas the men don't typically seem to and this is only in my own networks, so this is anecdotal, but the men typically take titles like web developer or like sort of more technical sort of terms, and they really seem to own that. Whereas the women that I've been exposed to, and I myself, we're always sort of like dancing around, like, oh, I do web design. Oh, it's kind of like this. Oh, and we don't really own it. And so that's one of the things. And it's supporting women to be really confident in that skill set that we have and those unique abilities that we bring to the role. And also in trying to encourage, like I have one of my kids, I have a daughter. And I try to really encourage her to do these sort of STEM programs and all of the stuff that, the public school system offers now to help support women getting into different roles. And so hiring women who have either the technical expertise now or they're looking to build it, is really important to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I'm wearing a bracelet today that I got, a STEM bracelet from a high school team from Techspiration. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're an organization that supports mostly grade 9, some 10, 11s as well, students, all female, who are looking to get into the tech space or into the trades.
Awesome.
And the whole program is around having sort of a 2-day event that brings together groups of, let's say like 5 or 6 team members from each school. They get paired up with a mentor, have a day where they get to learn about what they do on their job. They get to present it in front of the rest of the groups as a way to get them comfortable, speaking in public and build on that confidence.
Awesome.
So it's interesting that you brought that up. I just spent last Friday as a judge for that. It was amazing to see all of these younger students get up there and do presentations with such a degree of confidence. And then, you look at the recurring theme and what they're talking about and why they're excited about this program is to learn about STEM or other programs and really to understand how there needs to be more representation in these industries. So it's great. I have 2 young daughters myself. One of them, her birthday is today, actually. So looking forward to seeing her later for some cake.
Awesome.
But it is great to see that there's some organizations out there like Techspiration and businesses like yourself that sort of bridge that both from the industry side, but also those who are in school and still trying to determine what they want to do to say we need more representation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the other really important considerations is that women bring so much value into this space, partly because it is an underrepresented area, but also, like the skill sets and the different perspectives that women have is really important to get factored into this whole conversation around what's going on online. And if it's all sort of male dominated, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is why you're here today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that whole side of what you do and what you offer. The other side from my research about you and your business, of course, is that you're all about building and creating accessible online workspaces. So not just for women, but for other folks as well too. And you know, the term accessibility, it really can kind of take on a number of different meanings, you know, especially in the online world and the tech sector too. So what exactly does accessibility, does that term mean to you when it comes to the business that you offer?
Yeah, that's a great question because you're right, accessibility can mean sort of different things to different people. So at the root of it for me, it means that your content can actually be understood. So whether it's, and that people can literally access it. So when you talk about accessibility in the physical realm, you know, people are usually more familiar with like physical disabilities when you start talking about accessibility.
Of course.
And when you go switch into the online thing, it's a little bit around the physical, but there's also a whole pile of other things. And we feel very strongly, and the data backs it up, that if you design for that wider group of users with all of those, because there's preferences as well as actual disabilities, then it makes everything better because it is more accessible. And if it's accessible for that group, it will be accessible for everyone.
And there's some changes that are happening too. I know, like in my experience, you know, working for some agencies that focus on building websites or booking engines for big brands. It could be something as simple as their brand color is a light blue that doesn't work online. So you'd have to even think from a brand level of how to change that to make it more accessible. But also, you know, you look at the compliance that happens with WCAG in the States, and now I think Canada's rolling out a new requirement within the next maybe year or two that's going to really play a factor into a lot of, you know, brands who need to think about accessibility.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't want to over-regulate the industry necessarily, but there have to be guidelines, and there are guidelines, just like you said, the WCAG, the WCAG. But if people aren't aware of the guidelines, then you know there's not much you can do there. So it's like an evolving sort of a thing, and we're getting there.
Yeah.
And even Nova Scotia has the I just forgot what it's called, Accessibility Act. Disability Act, can't remember. And it talks a lot about accessibility, but it doesn't necessarily spell out the online piece yet. But you can tell that it's coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Forgive my ignorance, but you know, you're speaking of some suggested guidelines. What does that kind of look like when it comes to like the online world? Like what are some of those suggestions that, you know, should be kind of followed when it comes to a website?
Yeah. So we mentioned the WCAG, that's the Web Content Accessibility Guide. And they are an international set of standards. And they are around, so it's all about acronyms when you start talking about stuff online. And I always catch myself. But so it's POUR. So that's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And so every element of your website or your online project should be able to meet all four of those criteria. And so that could be, so perceivable is generally around like the visual look, like the brand colors. You know, the most websites now don't, they fail for accessibility standards to pass that visual contrast because people get really tied up with what they think their website looks like, you know. And so they get really tied up around the colors that are going to be chosen and stuff like that. So that would sort of, tends to fall more into the perceivable part of it. Operable is obvious that it should work. You know, you should be able to operate it regardless of whether you're on your laptop or a mobile or you have an assistive device.
Yeah, like a screen reader
or
or
a keyboard because your mouse is broken. You know, that's something I always talk about. And understandable, so that's, you know, you're not using a lot of jargon. You know, it's language translatable. There's a lot of different, like it covers a really, really wide range of stuff. And then robust kind of around making sure that you're using a platform that's going to be, it's going to stand up. You know, it's not going to be something you're going to have to change completely.
Good to know. Yeah. You touched on it very lightly about some of the barriers that you've experienced as well, but what are some of the barriers that people living with different abilities face when it comes to trying to navigate if, you know, say a website doesn't fall under those guidelines, doesn't follow those guidelines?
Yeah, I love this question because I could talk for ages about this because there's so many examples and it's ridiculous because most of us, people that have, you know, a fairly standard set of abilities would visit a website and maybe get irritated by something. but not necessarily recognize that it's not accessible. So you might go to, like, I often go to a website and a contact form it won't submit. Like there's an error, but you can't see, like the error doesn't appear on the visible side of the website. So there's an error, the form's not working, and you can't submit the contact form. So for someone who's using an assistive device, whether or not they can even find that contact form, because the contact form itself might not be coded so that their assistive device recognizes that there's a form, there's a form there, or they, these pop-ups.
Oh,
so you land on
those pop-ups.
Yeah, I'll try to dial myself back a little bit. But
no, you're passionate. It's good.
Yeah. So the pop-ups, for someone who's on an assistive device, pop-ups can trap them right in that thing, and so they don't even get to find out what you're offering on your website. They can't even get there. And yeah, around the things like whether you can see it or not, like literally whether you can make out the contrast of the text, or whether it resizes to fit your screen, or maybe you're on the bus in the middle of the day and you can't see because the screen is, the contrast just isn't there. Yeah, there's all, like it's so many things. It's hard to even get started talking about it. But yeah, there's so many different. It's just barrier after barrier after barrier.
Really?
And for a sighted individual, you can usually sort of, it's like a crutch, and you can kind of make your way through it in spite of these problems. But if you're not sighted, or if you have any kind of neurospicy conditions, like sometimes those are just complete, it's a full stop as soon as you land on that website. You can't get anywhere.
I just love neurospicy. Is that what
I know,
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I've not heard that before. I like that.
I can't take credit for it, but I love
That's
it
okay.
too.
I do love that.
Yeah, neurospicy.
I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, love that.
I have a few friends who sort of worked. I worked closely with in sort of past jobs, and they focus very much on accessibility. And once you are in that space and understand the importance of it, you can tell just from talking to you the passion around accessibility and web accessibility, in particular. It's something that you just. I think it's like once you press the gas, you can't really stop.
Yeah, you can't unsee this stuff.
Absolutely.
You can't unknow it.
Knowing that it can have such an impact. So, with that said, what sort of drove you in terms of wanting to focus on breaking down those barriers? What was there like an experience, or was there something that you saw that you said, oh no, this is what I need to get involved in?
So there's probably a few different things. So when I was growing up, I was in a very sort of middle class, white, privileged household, very liberal parents, and we were always very spent a lot of time making sure that we understood the privilege, like the position on the ladder, that we were pretty high on the privilege ladder, and so I think that was always sort of that's always in the back of my mind, is that trying to consider those other perspectives and that sort of empathy in all of the things that I do. So that may have sort of built the
pathway
base there.
anyway,
Yeah. And then when I was doing the website work and making my pretty little websites when I first got started, and I had no idea, all of this underlying, I had no idea. The 90% iceberg, that was, I had no idea. And so I started to gradually see little hints of it through the years, like sort of in the late 20 teens, I guess. But then it was in 2019, I attended a virtual webinar with a woman who's in London, England, and she's a blind web designer.
Wow.
See?
Wow.
That was, I was like, what?
That's super.
No, is that possible? And it's not only possible, it's like completely amazing.
Yeah.
And I literally had no idea. And I couldn't understand why I had never considered that in the past, and what that means for what I'm doing. Like, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
There's a lot. I was missing a lot. And then thinking, like, why am I excluding this enormous group of people because I had no idea that I was excluding them? It's just like, it's not that different from physical ability things where, people often don't recognize what kind of obstacles they face every day unless you have someone in your family or like in your special group that has that firsthand experience. And so, people with disabilities, even in Canada, that self-identify, through Stats Canada or whatever, maybe I'm supposed to talk about this later, I can't remember, but the number of people that identify as having a disability has doubled in Canada in the last 10 years. It's a massive number of people. Wow. It's huge.
Yeah.
And it could be like people aging, it could be all of these neurospicy sort of things that are being identified now. But the point is that it's this massive, massive group of people. And it's not just them, right? It's their loved ones and their friends and family who tend to be really vocal advocates and supporters because they see what their people go through to get through their regular day-to-day life. And so that makes that whole group even larger. And so to provide something that is actually, it's on the internet, which is supposed to be this great equalizer, and it's accessible only to this tiny little group of people who probably look just like what that web designer looks like, because it's based on that person's experience and that person's context, then to open that up just makes sense.
Never thought about it that way. Like the way that you put that was very interesting. Like having, a design from that perspective, but then also realizing that that's kind of who they're going to target to, but not necessarily knowing without having exposure to this.
And it's not a shame. It's not like a blame game either. I think that's the thing. When I talk to other disability advocates, they tend to be very clear on saying, we're not saying these things to make you feel bad. We're not trying to blame you or shame you because you didn't know. If you don't know what you don't know, and you can't do better until you start to learn these things. So that's kind of where it's at. It's all very supportive and raising everybody up.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure at its core, I hope this isn't a naive thing to say, at its core, I'm sure that most, businesses, organizations, people behind those businesses and organizations, once they know what they're not offering, they're going to want to offer it. Maybe it's the same sort of thing. Like they don't know what they don't know until, they're educated on the fact that, hey, your website, not the most accessible, not as easy to read through. And so given that information, I'm sure that they would want to make those changes. And like I say, I hope that's not a naive thought.
No, I think that's true. And I think that's certainly the case for most of our clients. I mean, we have a fairly niche market. And so we're mostly female founders, and they are mostly, service-based businesses. And so it's a very easy conversation in terms of, especially if you can run them through, using disability simulators and say, like, this is what it's like. Or, like I often do through my evaluation, I hold up my phone. I'm like, did you know? This is on your website, but I can't use it on my phone. That kind of thing is to show people what their website is missing or what they're missing is a lot more effective than me saying, oh, your stats are going to be this, or, blah, blah, blah. And who cares?
Yeah, if you have someone in front of a screen, the screen's being recorded, they're given a set list of tasks, and you have someone who's either in the marketing position or, responsible for that piece. We did some work like that with a few companies locally where they were given 3 or 4 tasks, and I won't name the company that we had to do it, but they ended up making a lot of changes, and because they saw firsthand, someone would get 2 or 3 steps in, and then they would just get lost. And then they would give feedback in a way that, you're not going to capture in a form. It's something that's more organic and natural, and once you see that, it resonates at a different level. And 2, if you're realizing that, hey, this makes up like a good percentage of my target audience, and those people who I want to connect with can't access.
And even if it doesn't, if it makes up 1%. The way search engines are going these days, everything is gearing more and more towards providing a good user experience. And so if you provide a crappy user experience, unintentionally or not, that's going to reflect poorly on you, and then your website is going to, gradually get lower and lower, and it has a cumulative effect over time. So, and that 1% or whatever that number is of people that can't use your website or don't have a good experience, what are the odds that they're going to reach out to you and tell you, hey, did you know? Like I'm going to. I'm that person. I'm like, I can't reach you. Your website's broken. But often, that you can't even find the contact information. And if I can't find it as a sighted individual, right? Someone who doesn't have, is using an assistive device and can't navigate the website in the first place, why should they have to take the time to contact you to tell you?
Absolutely.
It's kind of not their responsibility.
Well, we did talk about, I'll pivot here a little bit. We talked about, what was neurospicy? Neurospicy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So getting into another sort of term as well. Your website says you have a no bro marketing guarantee.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I know.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's a little tongue in cheek, and because I mean honestly, that's how I operate. But so my experience in marketing, per se, is generally that you get a certain type of information, a certain type of advice, and I don't think that it's necessarily applicable to everybody. And I would say that of the experiences that I've had with other web providers, web hosts providers, and other like designer, developer, whatever they want to call themselves, there's sort of a recurring theme, and the recurring theme is it's not supportive, it's not inclusive, it's more sort of, you should do this because I said so, and I know best because I'm this whatever guru. Mm-hmm. And that kind of stuff really, really bothers me. Mm-hmm. So anything that's like, anything that's not going to support the end user is something that I would consider to be bunk.
Bro marketing.
Oh, right, yeah.
I love it.
I love that you're like kind of shying away from it.
I
feel like there's like
right?
Yeah.
Let the people know. I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have those, it explains, your way of thinking, and also it ties back to what your brand's all about. Mm-hmm. And, again, it's that confidence, that you talked about at the start.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We don't do bro marketing.
No.
No.
I think I love that. I think that's great.
To me, the idea of bro marketing maybe is like a little bit too much confidence.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find a happy medium.
Oh, yeah. They overstate their exexpertise every single time.
It'll look cool and the people will come.
Yeah.
Will they?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're all set on our questions, I think, Steph. But that means, of course, that the floor is now yours. So is there anything that you would like to add?
I can't remember what I said when I was originally looking at these questions. It's mainly around. I think we've mostly covered it. It's mainly around this idea that the internet as it is not suitable.
Yeah.
It's not effective. It's not efficient. It's all like chasing your tail. And even today, I saw a webinar that was all around Google's AI overview, and how that's going to impact marketing, and everybody's freaking out about their website showing up in page number 1 or whatever. And so I'm often telling people, don't write for Google. Like, Google's not your customer. Google's not going to give you any money.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and everyone, I think, most people, especially from the studies that I've seen, the younger generations, they have sort of an ethical purchasing requirement, and they want to support people, and they want a genuine, authentic relationship, and we all do. And I think that the bro marketing stuff would have you go a very different direction, and sort of try to hit this magical snake oil, number 1 on whatever, that isn't going to do you any good at the end of the day. You're going to end up creating more and more, maybe recreating or regurgitating more and more pre-existing stuff that doesn't deserve to be there in the first place.
Takes the World Wide Web and turns it into the Wild Wild Web, as I like to call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a conversation this morning, and we were talking about that. We said, this is the Wild West. Anybody can post anything on there. It could be totally inaccurate. And how are you going to know? Like, average Joe business owner who's busy, Jill business owner, whatever, super busy, wearing too many hats already. Those of us who, we're business owners and moms and, partners and all of those things. And how are you supposed to filter out the stuff that you're seeing online? How do you know?
Yeah. That is a good question. So. It's one I think we'll continue to face for a little while yet.
Oh, yeah, it's not going away.
No time soon.
Yeah.
Okay, Steph, thank you so much for the time. It's been a very insightful conversation.
We're
taking away lots of new terms and some education. I don't know, I might cut this out. What would you give Digital Nova Scotia's website?
I haven't
if you're rating
looked at it. Yeah, I haven't looked at it No, I'd have to do a closer dive. Okay. I will say the emails, I've had trouble with broken links.
That's okay.
That's on me.
No,
we learn.
I don't know.
Oh, it's not?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
maybe it is.
I've reached out a couple of times.
And we adjust.
There we
go.
Yeah.
Like you said, you can't fix anything if you don't.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know yet.
And the other thing, and the other thing too is that everybody makes mistakes. You know, like my inbox is littered. I used to have a little what do you call them? Not a shame gallery, but like a what do you call that? You know, when you take pictures of the stuff that you think is awful. What do you call? I forget what that's called.
I don't know. I don't have a shame gallery.
It's
Maybe
like
I need one.
It's like, do you guys know? It's like so I would take little screenshots and say like, you know, there'd be like typos in the subject line or in that little sneak preview text that they put in there, and they'd forget to customize that, so it'd be like the lorem ipsum. Yeah. Okay. And so I used to just take a little, because everybody's doing it. Like the big name companies are doing that, just like all of us little guys.
My favorite is when I get the like, hello, insert name here.
Yeah, we used to
very personalized email.
Like try and do a little extra spiciness when we would do placeholder web copy.
Yeah.
When we were working with clients and we'd use like cat ipsum or different things, and then there's times where you'd see a lot of meows on a page that shouldn't have it, and it would go live, and you'd say, well, meow, we have to fix that.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Sorry, I had to do it.
Well, on that note,
I used to do something similar. I'd be like, oh, I'm so funny. Look at how funny I am. Yeah. It's not worth it.
We worked with a ferry service one time, and I tried to work in a lot of references to Don't Pay the Ferryman, which most of our viewers probably won't know who Krista Berg is, but I inherited my dad's record collection, and he's got a song, 2 or 3 songs that have to do with like ferry type things, and they were like, we appreciate the references to this artist, but
please stop.
Please cut it out. I was like, okay, cool. I'm not the copywriter. I'm just having too much fun over here. I'll get back to work. Thanks.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh my. Okay, this has been too much fun, as I tried to say 5 minutes ago, but we just keep going here. Thank you very much for this time. Like I say, it's been a very educational conversation, and one that I think that needs to continue to happen. So we certainly appreciate you making the time to have it with us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me. That was fun.
Thanks, Steph.
Recorded by This Is Marketing, unblanding branding since 2015.